I'd say the word cruel pretty much sums up everything we went through this season because, there were plenty of peaks and valleys here. There were plenty of times where, you know, everyone would want to start using the B word, saying that they're back after, being able to rattle off a few wins and, be able to take some of these key series. But they'd always just kind of regress back to the mean and just, you know, if at one thing they were at least consistent in being mediocre this year. The
Exactly what Rick Hahn wanted to avoid,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
well, the water always found its level, and the Sox always seemed to just it would always be one step forward, two steps back with this team. So it was definitely tough to see, but at this point, we're on to next year.
Yeah, that's honestly kind of what the mindset is. I feel like among the Southside faithful, and we are very faithful. We'll say that as we're complaining about this, it's just because we care so much. So, if you got any stories from that of how the White Sox ruined your summer, go and drop them in comment section here on Tap Sportsnet on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed. You can go drop them in via there and our Facebook page on Tap Sportsnet there as well. All right. This is hard to do, and this is something that we usually kind of do on a season reflection show, but obviously we're kind of mourning this right now, right? Because we know that the chase for this AL Central is, essentially over. So, biggest disappointment this year. It could be area of the team, it could be an individual player, but let's hear it. I'd like to hear some. I feel like we can have multiple things here, but let's go and talk about some of the biggest disappointments and how this thing got to where it was and tailspun so badly.
Yeah, I think for me personally, it would start with Yohan Moncada and Yasmani Grandal. So those are two guys that you and I both support. We both wear their jerseys consistently to games, and we've seen flashes of like both these guys being able to be key contributors on this team. So that stretch where Yasmani Grandal came back from the IL in August last year and offensively really put the team on his back. He looked like one of the best hitters in the world during that stretch.
I want to say he was the third best run producer in baseball during that stretch. I think that's right. Yeah.
It was something like that. And, injuries being a big part of that. I would say in how he kind of was off and on this year, had a lot of stints on the IL, and just anytime there's knee injuries with a catcher, I mean, you just know that those guys are never going to be the same. And, over the past year and a half, he's had a lot of issues with those knees. So whether or not that was the big reason for his drop in production in the plate, I don't know. But, regardless, he was just more than a shell of his former self. I mean, he just could not stay healthy this year. And then even when he was, most of the time you'd even rather see a guy like Sebi Zavala in there just because he just wasn't getting it done at the plate. And then, same deal with Moncada, incapable of being able to stay hot consistently, didn't have that like gap power that he used to back in 2019. And, even though the fielding was pretty good for him overall this year, in a key game yesterday, just really didn't have it with the glove.
Right. Yeah, you even had to text me and alert me. So are you done officially with him now? And I'd gone on this show probably about, I think it was during that hot stretch. It was during a nice stretch when the Sox were on the road in Oakland, right? They just won the series in Seattle, go to Oakland, and they put a bombardment on them in that first game at Oakland. And Tony and I got on this show for a Sox on Tap After Dark. And I'd said that, Tony had mentioned that this is what we expected more of consistently from Moncada. Maybe not 5 hits and 5 RBIs every game, but you get the gist, right? Of consistent, run production and, it really laced in the ball like he was at that time. You got that in very, 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 very minuscule spurts. I would agree 100% with you. And if you go back and listen to the show, if you listen to us around the All-Star break, me and Steve and Tony were on here for our All-Star break special. And those two guys, I think it's funny that you mentioned them because Steve and I identified those two Cubans as our second half X factors. And if they could step it up, this team had a chance. And guess what? They didn't overall. What did Yaz have? Like 3 home runs so far this year? Absolutely pathetic. All the underlying offensive numbers also atrocious as well. So I go with you there. I can take that a little more general, and these guys both play a factor into it. And talking about biggest disappointment, this is a team built to hit home runs, right? Built on power. And we saw when they do that consistently, what they can do, i.e. last year, right? That wasn't the case from top to bottom in the lineup. You brought in, obviously, those 2 guys. I think you covered them well. You go and you bring in a guy like AJ Pollock. Well, sure, he's a hot and cold hitter, but the hot was never hot enough to really, really be a game changer of sorts. And kind of ironic since their motto is change the game. So that one didn't work out. You got Jose Abreu, who went on the longest home run drought of his career during this chase for this division here. You really could have used some of that pop. Can't get on Andrew Vaughn too much. He is leading the team in home runs, I believe, still as it stands right now after tonight's game. I know Gavin Sheets did deposit one in the 8th inning of tonight's game, but the overall lack of power there. If your top guy is hitting what I think Vaughn's up to like 17, like I think it blows my mind when you go and you see Aaron Judge, he's at 60, right? It's like, oh, we'll get 61 and whatever. And Albert Pujols is going to, on unbelievable second half, and he's approaching 700 for his career. The White Sox couldn't have one guy that can get to 20. That's really, really sad. And that would be the biggest disappointment in my book.
Yeah, no. And you really hit the nail on the head there. It's absolutely pathetic if you ask me. And makes me want to retract even just putting an ounce of question into why Yasmani Grandal was unproductive based on those knees. I think Albert Pujols' knees have a few more miles on his than Yasmani Grandal's. Granted, he's not squatting behind the plate, but I mean, let's be real. He looks more like he's 50 than he is like the 42 that he says he is. And yeah, he's just out there having an absolute terror of a second half. And, I hope he is able to get that 700. But yeah, guys like that being able to out hit all these guys on this team that are built for power and not even be built for power. They've shown it in the past. It's not like it's something that we haven't seen from them before, and just turns out they're actually not capable of it. All of these guys, top to bottom, have it in there somewhere. They just didn't pull it out this year. And it's tough because it's not like it was 1 or 2 guys in that lineup that were underperforming. It was damn near everyone.
Yeah, right. And I know there's a lot of factors that can go into it, and we've tried to dissect it. I think there was a show where everyone was calling for Frank Menachino. I think that was definitely a phase for all White Sox fans there. But then, as soon as TLR leaves dugout, then they did start upping that, and they had a stretch there where they were near the top of the league, right, in that kind of 2.5-ish week stretch, I think, towards the top of the league in those home run and other kind of power categories, but obviously not enough all year. And as we're getting into this, since this is, as it's titled, the White Sox Ruin My Summer support group, Andrew, I think one of the hardest things for me to fathom, just as a fan, we did a lot of objective baseball analysis there, talking about this team's struggles, but as a fan, right, we go to the game. We go to a decent amount of them over the summer. It's always a good time meeting up with friends and, tailgating in Lot B and all that. The White Sox played like shit at home, and they hit like shit at home, even though it's like the 3rd or 4th most home run friendly ballpark in the league. I don't know how to explain that. So I can't even really get into the why behind that, but the results of it were that you had fans booing. You had fans holding sell the team signs at home. You had, people leaving early. Like I said, I think I left more games early just because I knew they were lifeless and weren't going to come back, and they couldn't have that big spark. Brian Goodwin late walk-off home run like they did last year, right? I just wanted to get that out there because it should be a hitter's paradise, and it was the furthest thing from that for the White Sox this year. Other teams had no problem doing it, but we did.